This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to Balanced Debate for the Old North State. Most every man, woman, and child in North Carolina is impacted directly or indirectly by the office of State Treasurer. So on this special edition of NC Spin, we asked State Treasurer Dale Folwell to come report to the people of our state and discuss some of the relevant issues impacting North Carolina. Now, in addition to Treasurer Folwell, our panel this week includes John Hood, Syndicated columnist and author, and Chris Fitzsimon, political analyst and columnist. We're going to begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
Quality of life enjoyed by North Carolinians comes from the sacrifice of our state and local government retirees. These men and women risked their lives in times of danger. They taught our children, kept our neighborhoods clean, and protected the state's resources. They are North Carolina's silent heroes. The North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association proudly serves as the voice for more than 300,000 retirees across North Carolina. Our retirees deserve no less, and every day we stand by them.
Mr. Treasurer, you've had a most interesting life. You've worked at various times as a gas station attendant, as a custodian, a trash collector, and motorcycle mechanic before being elected 4 terms to the North Carolina General Assembly and serving as head of our state's Employment Security Commission. So with that background, you were elected in 2016 to be our state treasurer. You say your life can sort of be compartmentalized into thirds, a third blue collar, a third white collar, and now a third public servant. How have your experiences helped you in your present role as state treasurer?
Well, it's helped me immensely. Most of the things that I use on a day-to-day basis, I learned in the first third of my life as a blue-collar worker. And the reason that's important as state treasurer is that we have hundreds of thousands of state employees and retirees that every day they serve the citizens of this state with their hands, their back, their feet, their calluses, of course their hearts and their minds. That's what I did for most of my life, and I always think about them anytime that we're making a decision.
So you can relate to
treasurer.
these. Yeah,
correct.
You can relate to these people. I think with this background, I think our viewers would be interested in knowing, now that you have been in office for a little more than a year, your perspective on North Carolina. How are we doing? Are we moving forward, somewhat stagnant, or falling behind?
Well, we're moving forward financially. As you know, your viewers are hearing stories from all over the United States about problems that cities, counties, and states themselves are running into in terms of unfunded pension and health care liabilities.
And we're going to talk about that a good deal.
And we're in strong financial shape as far as the rainy day fund and many other aspects of our state government. But we have 2 big critical things which we're going to talk about, which are the unfunded health care and pension liabilities.
So far as it goes, we've sort of had a pattern, particularly since Roy Cooper was elected our governor, where the legislature would pass a bill, the governor would veto it, the legislature would override the veto, and then we'd have a court case. Now, this is tying up lots of money and time, and it's sort of frustrating for those people in North Carolina who are trying to figure out what's going on. What can we do to break this cycle?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm in a unique position as state treasurer because we manage the 26th largest pool of public money in the world. That the amount of money we manage is actually 6 times larger than one year's state budget. So I'm in a unique position as state treasurer whereby when I succeed, the governor succeeds and the legislature succeeds, and that's what I focus on every day.
One complaint while we're talking about overview issues in North Carolina, I hear a lot of people in state government saying they have a hard time finding good, qualified, competent people to go to work in state government. They can't pay them enough. This past week or so, we saw Governor Cooper had given his cabinet secretaries fairly large raises using that same rationale that He had to pay more to attract good people. Shouldn't the state be willing to pay its employees better?
Well, the state treasurer doesn't control the compensation package, but what I can do is I can educate the people who either work for the state or are thinking about coming to work for the state about the true value of these benefits of health care and defined benefit. And if you add the pension and the health care plan, it increases a person's compensation by almost 32%, but it's sort of invisible unless somebody points it out to them, and that's my job.
So while we're on the general subject of state government, one of the things the state treasurer and all the other statewide executive elected officials do is serve on the Council of State. In that role, you've had an experience now for some time seeing the interaction there. Do you think that the Council of State, composed again of these statewide executive branch officials, most of them independently elected, or all of them independently elected, do you think that they are adequately consulted? Do you think they have the appropriate role in advising the other branches of government or making decisions about state assets?
Well, just a few days ago, I gave my opinion to the people of North Carolina on this subject. The Council of State just met last Tuesday. It was 30 seconds with me giving the interest report, 30 seconds with the Insurance Commissioner Causey giving the insurance report. But the rest of the agenda of the Council of State is about the purchase and the sale and the otherwise disposing of state property, especially with the news that's come out recently about the UNC healthcare merger, which is really the biggest asset the state taxpayers have paid for in North Carolina. That, as large as that has never come before the Council of State and was never going to be on the agenda for the Council of State. So I think the Council of State can play a better role as long as they're honoring the laws that are in the books of reviewing transactions of this size, especially when it comes to things that taxpayers have paid for that have the potential of being disposed or merged with some other entity without anybody looking at it.
You're saying that it wasn't even scheduled to come before the Council of State?
It was not.
Well, of course, now we know that proposed marriage, at least right now, has been scuttled, is not going to happen. I wonder if there's a connection here.
Yeah. And you talk about, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead.
You talk about the advise and consent role the Council of State supposedly plays, and I agree with you that it ends up being just property matters more times than not. But traditionally, the state treasurer has also been an advisor to the legislature so far as tax matters and financial matters of the state, and it seems like in recent years that role has diminished. First of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, why?
Well, obviously, I don't have the horsepower that former Treasurer Harlan Bowles had, the keeper of the public purse, the person who's considered the best state treasurer of our state.
Shouldn't you? I mean, you're vested with that authority.
Yeah, I should, but it's also important to understand that I only give opinions when I'm fully competent about, what it is I'm talking about. So,
well, that never stopped us on this show.
You're on the wrong program,
but I have a great working relationship with the General Assembly as well as the executive branch, and I think that as far as the UNC healthcare merger was concerned, I came out and wanted 4 basic questions answered. And if you'd like to get into those, I'll be glad to.
But you never did get them answered.
No, never got any of them answered.
I don't know if I might be jumping ahead a little bit when you talked about your job is to let state employees sort of know and teachers know the value of their benefits. For a long time, the theory was you might not get paid a lot in the public sector or maybe not get paid as much as in the private sector, but the benefits were outstanding and that was a way to recruit and keep good people. But now with these unfunded liabilities, there's a lot of pressure to both increase healthcare costs to the employee. There's talk of obviously a lot of people are talking about changing our pension system. How do you, if you're advising legislators, how do you balance all those pressures with the need to retain and recruit good people?
Well, I'll tell you what I'll tell your viewers what I've said publicly, and that is that as long as I'm the state treasurer, I'm going to figure out a way to preserve, strengthen, but sustain this pension plan as we know it.
Dale, I think there's a perception, particularly among state employees, which I guess is probably to be expected, but I think there's a perception that whereas Chris was totally right in that in years past, it was understood you weren't going to get paid market wages if you went to work for the state government, but your benefits package was going to be sufficiently great enough to compensate for that. I think there's a perception today that it's not as good a benefits package as it used to be.
Well, actually, the pension plan is as good as it's ever been for 2 basic reasons.
Health plan particularly, I think.
Okay. Well, the pension plan is one of the 5 best funded in the United States, But the payout, we're spending almost over $500 million every 30 days for pension benefits for retired state and local employees on the pension side. And 40 years ago, we had 248 90-year-olds getting a pension check from the pension plan. Last month, we had 7,120 90-year-olds. So when you
so
look,
you're saying we live in too long?
No, it's a blessed event.
Yeah.
But when the interest rates have collapsed, Wall Street fees have gone up, payouts have gone up, and life expectancies have gone up, it puts pressure on the defined benefit
All right,
plan.
so we're moving into some of your duties. Let's get into primarily one of your more important ones, which is namely investing our state funds. You have the sole responsibility for investing approximately $100 billion, that's with a B, in state funds. There's some who believe this is just too much authority and too much pressure to put on one person, and suggest having some sort of an investment committee or some other approach to making these investments. Now that you've been there for a while, what's your opinion of that?
My opinion is that we do have these committees. We have an investment advisory committee, as well as we have a teasers board for the teachers plan. And we also have an elders board for the local government plan.
We need to explain. Teasers, by the way, is TSERS, which is Teachers and State Employees Retirement.
Right. And elders is local government, LG. And we do have those advisory boards in place. But I think there's a reason why North Carolina has one of the 5 best funded pension plans in the United States. And that is because we've had the sole fiduciary. Now, on top of that, if your viewers know that the pension plan of South Carolina, just to our south, is only 55% funded. One of the Kentucky pension plans this morning is 23% funded.
Illinois is a disaster.
Right, but North Carolina's is 90% funded, and that's all under the stewardship of a sole fiduciary.
But is that because of the investments, or is that because of the fact that the legislature has done its job in funding the pension plan?
Well, it's a combination of all that, and I always want to take an opportunity to say that it's not just the legislature that funds the pension plan. Every month, the employees of North Carolina and local government also contribute to this pension plan out of their own paycheck.
Yeah. All right. Previous treasurers have maintained on this subject that if you devise some sort of committee, and I know when I worked for Harlan Boyles, we went up and down one side and the other. If you give other people too much authority as far as making the decisions on state investments, then the conflict of interest issue starts coming in. If an investment house is giving you money, then supposedly they're expecting you to invest your funds with them. Turn that around, though, in the office of the state treasurer. You have to run for elected office, and it's expensive to do so statewide, and the people who primarily are willing to give campaign funds, donations, are people who have interest in how that money gets invested. How do you avoid that conflict of interest charge?
You don't take it.
So you're saying
want
that
a short
as state
answer
treasurer,
today.
okay. So you're saying as state treasurer, you do not accept campaign contributions from these big investment houses and so forth?
Almost 99% of my contributions that came into my campaign when I applied for this job came from individuals inside the state of North Carolina.
Interesting. That's a fact I did not know. I think that's, frankly, I think it's worthy. It was one of the things Harlan never did very much either, by the way.
Well, it's not just the investment houses. It's the consultants associated with the investment house, the attorneys associated with the investment house, the actuaries. It's not just the investment house. It's all these other tangential industries that are tied to this portfolio.
You've used the word fiduciary a couple of times while we've been talking. A fiduciary is someone who has a duty to the beneficiaries of the funds that he is overseeing or she is overseeing. How does that affect your willingness in making investments to take risks, risky investments?
Actually, it's very complementary. A fiduciary has to be loyal to the participants of the plan and exercise duty of care. And that's what we do every day at the Treasurer's Office. We have loyalty to the participants of the plan, the taxpayers in North Carolina in general in the Treasurer's Office, but also we exercise duty of care. North Carolina's pension plan has never been the most riskiest pension plan in the United States, and it's probably one of the reasons why it's one of the 5 best funded.
Yeah, I hate to keep talking about it, but I remember when I worked in the Office of State Treasurer, we kept getting gigged. Back in those days, we were earning 9% on investments, and there were people, particularly in the legislature, who wanted to say, well, California's earning 13 and so-and-so's earning this and that and the other. And Harlan always said, when I'm investing my money, I'll take as much risk as I want. When I'm investing the state employees' money, I'm not going to do that.
Well, there's another aspect to this, as you know, which isn't just the rate, the interest rate or the rate of return on an investment, but the cost of making it. So just the other day, your office announced that you had, I think I'm right about this, taken $4 billion worth of essentially index fund or passively invested funds in-house to reduce the fees. And I think I read that your overall goal would be to get to $13.5 billion done in-house, which I assume is because it's an index fund, you're not trying to beat the market. The reason you're doing that is to reduce the cost, right?
Exactly right. Great point. We're one of the few treasuries in the United States, even though we're the 26th largest pool of public money in the entire world. We're one of the few treasuries in the United States that did not have the capability of managing money with an passive index product inside their own business.
That's a relatively recent phenomenon, I think. Because
but we're very proud of the folks in the investment management division. We started with a shadow portfolio in the summer of last year. We put $100 million in the passive in November, and we start tracking it versus the bigger
now these
index
funds basically they are earning money based on what broad indexes like Standard & Poor's 500 and so forth like that is.
Right.
Part of the advantage to this, as I understand it, is that you're not having to pay management fees on, or as much management fees. That was one of the things when you went into office that you talked quite a bit about. The large amount of money North Carolina was spending on management fees. You've reduced some of that. Tell us about that.
Well, we have. The management fees from the time Harlan Bowles left office were $50 million per year. The year that I was sworn in, the management fees were $700 million per year.
Wow.
Over a 16-year period. So last year we reduced management fees by $73 million. And of course, every time you save it one year, you save it every year. So that's a 4-year run rate of almost $250 million.
How much was that savings again?
$73 million so far.
Okay.
But let me just take one moment to tell you that we had people managing money for us on the second floor in the pension plan, also managing money for us in the 401k on the first floor. They weren't giving us the break-point advantage of the totality of that relationship. So we had one fee reduced by $2.4 million by going to that money manager and saying, we need to get the benefit of the totality of our relationship, and $2.5 million in fees went out just like that, just by asking the question.
There are, and you know, I'm not a investment expert, but I know you've been, this approach has gotten you publicity around the country. There's been some critics that have said that without these high fees, we're missing out on high rates of return, particularly in the boom stock market times. So I think that was in the Wall Street Journal article not too long ago. What's your response to those folks?
Well, I applied for this job by saying that we were going to reduce Wall Street fees. Number two, that we were going to freeze family premiums in the state health plan. And number three, we were going to bring transparency to the office. I never promised the crystal ball. So everybody who talks about that, obviously they have a crystal ball. My job as state treasurer is to look at, with a loyalty and duty of care to the participants, is to look at where we are. And where we were when I took office is we had $11 billion worth of blank checks. Is $11 billion worth of money that we had promised to money managers that they had not yet drawn. Well, in the previous year, the pension plan did not earn enough money to pay out the benefits. So if you're faced with a situation of $11 billion of blank checks that people can write from commitments we made, and you didn't earn what you paid out to pensioners a year before, the prudent fiduciary thing to do is to figure out where you are in these relationships. On top of that, my predecessor committed twice as much money in the year that she left than she did in the previous year. Right, so she did 2 years worth of investments in 1 year.
Well, let's talk about that. You talk about rate of return and so forth. Exactly what was the rate of return on our pension investments last year?
The rate of return was 13.5%. The hurdle is 7.2. Unfortunately, we have not achieved our 7.2% rate of return on average for the last 20 years, and we're not expected to for the next 20 years.
You mean on average over a
20-year period?
I mean, obviously, in a given year, you can be higher.
Right. So, and we're not going to assume it we're not going to hit that over the next 20 years, and that goes back to this.
Yeah, because anybody looked brilliant last year. Sure. I mean, let's be real honest about it. It was a great year.
But that goes back to sustainability. And so we're focused now on how this plan has been around for the last 50 years. How can we work with stakeholders and keep it sustainable for the next 50 years? Because I think this plan is very important to the folks out there today while we're sitting here. We're educating our kids, protecting us from criminals.
1 in 7 people in North Carolina, 1 in 8 people in North Carolina is affected by this?
You talked about the pressures facing the pension plan with the growing costs, the people who are living longer and all those things. Can we keep a defined benefit plan?
That's the key question.
We can, if stakeholders will work with me to accept the facts of where we are.
But this is bankrupted, almost bankrupted General Motors.
When you say work with you, what does that mean? What would have to be done to keep that?
Well, number one is that the minimum retirement age used to be in this pension plan for up until 1975. There is no minimum retirement age in the state pension plan right now. So once a person gets their years of service, they can start drawing a pension. Now we're talking about new hires, obviously.
Right.
But what I'm trying to communicate is that for women in North Carolina especially, they could literally be retired for longer than they work for state government. And with no minimum retirement age, it's just the pressure that's being placed on it. Now, when interest rates were at 10% and Harlan Bowles only had to earn 5, even I can jump over that table. But we're in a totally different environment right now of historically low interest rates, and that's some of the pressures that
I need to
face.
move on.
Yeah.
Perhaps the area of your office that has drawn the most media attention from state employees particularly is the state health plan. This plan was administered for many years by the legislature. It was put under the state treasurer's office in 2012. Treasurer Folwell, we've got varying numbers that we've heard, but there's widespread agreement. We've made health care promises to public employees that we're not able to fulfill. What's your assessment as to our unfunded liability on health plan?
Well, your viewers should be a little confused because the treasurer has the pension plan and the state health plan.
Right.
The pension plan, as I've stated, is one of the 5 best funded pension plans in the United States.
What is it, 93% funded, 94%?
Realistically, it's about 90.
Yeah, okay.
But the state health plan is one of the worst funded in the United States, where our insolvency ratio, according to Pew Research, is right behind Illinois, the same Illinois you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So your viewers will be asking yourself, how could we have one of the 5 best in one part of the building and the 5 worst? And the answer is, for 40 years, unlike the pension plan, where money was being paid by the employee, the employer, and that money grew, for 40 years, state employees were eligible for lifetime health care after a certain period of time.
At age 65. You worked 5 years for the state, age 65.
It's 60 or 30 years, or 30 years.
Yeah, all right.
So my point of saying that is that for 40 years, these people were eligible for lifetime health care, but no money has ever been put aside. That's how one is solvent.
So we've been talking about this now for years. I'm sorry to cut you off,
okay.
but we're running out of time, and I've got a lot of stuff I want to get in here. We've been talking about this unfunded liability for many, many years. Very little has been done about it other than the fact that the legislature changed the formula for how long you've got to work and went to a staged formula. When are we going to finally start taking a bite out of that? What you said previously was $40 billion?
It's $35 billion as we sit here. We took a tiny bite out of it last year. The state health plan was scheduled to forecast to lose over 100.
So what are we doing? I'm sorry, but we got short answers.
We're taking advantage of our largeness. We're signing contracts that benefit our participants and our taxpayers. We're redesigning the health plan card so that our state employees understand that every time they pull that card out of their pocket, that's their money they're spending. We're driving the providers and Blue Cross Blue Shield, our third-party administrator, to redesign the explanation of benefit, which doesn't explain anything. It's the only thing in our viewers' life.
I used to work over there, and I listened to that, and I got pretty confused.
Yeah. So it's the only thing in your viewer's life that they don't know the value and the price of what they're getting, even after they consume it. You know what you pay for that.
And have no choice about it.
And have no choice. You know what you pay for that bow tie and that last tank of gas you just bought. But a big portion of people's income goes toward health care, and they don't know the value.
So what do we do? I mean, the State Employees Association, who endorsed you when you ran for state treasurer, were pretty adamant about the fact that we shouldn't make up this $35 billion on the backs of the state employees. Where's it going to come from?
Well, we're actually optimistic about that, and the reason we are is that we don't have a choice. You know, 7 years ago,
Got that. Where's it coming from?
It's coming from taking advantage of our largeness, cutting out waste, fraud, and abuse, which you've heard about on this show before. But last year we were supposed to lose $100 million in the state health plan. We ended up making $24 million, and we froze family premiums, we froze Medicare Advantage premiums, we froze active independent premiums. We charge a $25 premium for individuals. But I'm pretty optimistic that the largest purchaser of health care and pharmaceutical benefits in this state.
Can this be done by pennies and paper clips, as you've said in the past? Or, I mean, it looks to me like there's got to be some sort of designation of some massive amounts of funds.
I'm optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is that the largest purchaser of this product in this state should be able to do it better and more efficiently on behalf of the participants and the taxpayers of this state. If we turn 700,000 participants into watchdogs, we're going to be very successful in driving down the cost of health care in North Carolina.
Wow. Fascinating. Treasurer Folwell, you obviously know your subject, and we could discuss it for a long time, but unfortunately, we're out of time. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch us on Facebook. Next week, we return to our more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
Quality of life enjoyed by North Carolinians comes from the sacrifice of our state and local government retirees. These men and women risked their lives in times of danger. They taught our children, kept our neighborhoods clean, and protected the state's resources. They are North Carolina's silent heroes. The North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association proudly serves as the voice for more than 300,000 retirees across North Carolina. Our retirees deserve no less, and every day we stand by them.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.